When Kansas lawmakers recently handed Governor Sam Brownback the power to pick appeals court judges, they wanted to make the process more public and accountable. But the Republican leader has run into a whirl of criticism for refusing to divulge the names of the candidates who have applied for a newly created seat on the Kansas Court of Appeals. What are they so upset about? We keep hearing about the story.
Well, because traditionally those names have been made available through the Missouri Plan, the so-called Missouri Plan, where there's a panel selected and you have some sense of it. But in this case, I think Governor Brownback has an argument. You know, when an executive appoints judges, as for example the President of the United States does, he's not or she's not required to publish a list of the potential nominees. I think Governor Brownback is approaching it in the same way. I think maybe some of the concerns are overblown. Now, the concern about whether the governor should be appointing judges or not is another issue, but making public the panel is probably piling on a little bit.
But they're saying he's being very secretive by not releasing these names when that was the old system where the public would know every name that was being nominated.
Right, and one of the governor's arguments in changing the process was to make the process more transparent and so that there would be more political accountability, and there's simply not going to be in this case, despite the fact that the chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate says that, well, this is going to make someone politically accountable now. Who? Because if the governor doesn't have to say who the candidates are that he's considering, and then it's on the confirmation of the Senate, there is no transparency in this process. So I think the people who are critics are rightly fair to say that this is questionable because the governor was the one who suggested, let's make this more open, let's make this more transparent, let's have the public's input. And now the public, and no one but the governor and his very conservative Senate, has any say